Okay, so let me begin with something that nobody in the mainstream media is actually saying out loud, and it matters enormously. The United States just conducted a strike on an Iranian oil tanker. Iran responded with ballistic missiles. The missiles missed their targets. And now we are watching the White House oscillate between war and diplomacy so rapidly that even senior officials cannot keep track of the actual policy. This is not confusion. This is something far more dangerous. Let me explain what is actually happening here. I am Professor Jiang, and this channel exists to decode power shifts before the headlines catch up. Subscribe, hit the bell, and stay locked in, because this situation in the Middle East reveals something fundamental about American strategic collapse that the cable news networks simply do not have the intellectual architecture to discuss. Let me take you back to the foundational question. Why is the United States striking Iranian oil tankers in the first place? The official answer is that Iran is attempting to breach a blockade, but here is where the analysis gets very interesting. The United States maintains a naval presence in the Persian Gulf that is by any measure overwhelming. 11 aircraft carrier strike groups, dozens of military bases, thousands of troops stationed across the region. And yet, despite this extraordinary military superiority, America cannot prevent Iranian drones and missiles from reaching their targets. Kuwait's airport was severely damaged. One person was killed, multiple others injured. This is not a minor incident. This is a demonstration of American military vulnerability in a region where America is supposed to be absolutely dominant. Now, let me address something directly. I am not saying the United States is militarily weak. What I am saying is far more precise and far more alarming. American military superiority no longer translates into strategic control. The gap between capability and outcome has become catastrophic. This is what game theorists call the asymmetry problem. America can destroy Iranian infrastructure. Iran cannot destroy American infrastructure. But Iran can impose costs on American interests, on shipping, on regional stability, on the credibility of American commitments at a fraction of the military expenditure required to stop them. That is an asymmetry that favors Iran, not America. Let me bring in the historical parallel here, because this pattern is not new. Consider the British Empire in the 1920s and 1930s. Britain possessed the world's most powerful navy. Britain controlled the seas absolutely. And yet, Britain could not prevent the rise of German military power, could not enforce its will in the Far East, and could not maintain its global order without constantly expending resources it did not have. The historian Paul Kennedy called this imperial overreach, the moment when military capability exceeds strategic capacity. Britain was not defeated militarily. Britain was defeated by the cost of maintaining an empire it could no longer afford. The United States is entering that same phase right now, and the Iran situation is a perfect case study in how this collapse unfolds. Okay, let me shift now to the diplomatic dimension, because this is where the real strategic story emerges. Secretary of State Marco Rubio told Congress that a deal with Iran could happen today, could happen tomorrow, could happen next week. But he cautioned there is no guarantee the Senate or the American people would accept it. Think about what this statement reveals. It reveals that the Trump administration is simultaneously preparing for war and preparing for peace. It is signaling strength and signaling desperation. It is striking Iranian assets and offering negotiations. This is not strategy. This is reactive oscillation. Let me ask you a question. Why would Iran negotiate right now? Iran just demonstrated that its ballistic missiles can reach American military bases in the region. Iran just showed that despite American air defenses, Iranian strikes can cause real damage. From Iran's perspective, the cost-benefit calculation has shifted in their favor. Why would they agree to American terms when they are demonstrating increasing capability? The answer is they would not. And the administration knows this, which means the diplomatic offers are not genuine negotiating positions. They are political theater designed to manage American domestic opinion. Okay, now I want to bring in something that the mainstream analysis completely misses. The Trump administration is changing its Iran stance, not because Trump is impulsive, though he said, quote, "It's just the way I am," but because American strategists have realized that the cost of maintaining a confrontation with Iran exceeds the benefit. This is not weakness, this is rational recalibration. But it is recalibration that comes too late. America spent years sanctioning Iran, years building military pressure, years signaling that Iran was an existential threat. And now America is attempting to negotiate from a position that looks increasingly like retreat. This creates a credibility crisis not just with Iran, but with every American ally in the region who believed America was committed to a long-term confrontation. Let me address the deeper strategic question. What is actually at stake in the Middle East right now? It is not territory. It is not resources in the traditional sense. What is at stake is the architecture of American power projection. The Middle East is the region where American naval power, American air power, and American military bases converge to create a zone of American dominance. If that dominance is eroding, if Iran can strike American bases, if American allies like Kuwait suffer damage, if American blockades can be breached, then the entire system of American regional hegemony is in question. And if that system is in question, then every other region where America relies on military superiority to enforce its will is also in question. This is what I mean when I say the Iran situation reveals something fundamental about American strategic collapse. It is not that America is losing a war. It is that America is losing the ability to prevent wars from starting in the first place. It is losing the ability to deter challengers through the mere presence of superior force. This is a civilizational shift, not a tactical setback. Okay, let me now synthesize this into a clear analytical frame. There is a concept that strategists call the Malacca dilemma. The idea that a rising power becomes vulnerable when its interests extend far beyond its borders and depend on sea lanes and choke points it does not control. China faces the Malacca dilemma because Chinese trade depends on shipping through the Strait of Malacca, which is not controlled by China. But America faces an inverse problem. America controls vast military infrastructure across the Middle East, but it cannot control the behavior of regional powers. America can defend its bases. America can strike Iranian assets, but America cannot prevent Iran from choosing to fight. And that loss of control, that inability to dictate outcomes in a region where America invested decades of military presence is what makes this moment so significant. Now, I want to be transparent with you. I am not predicting imminent American collapse. I am not saying the United States is about to lose the Middle East tomorrow. What I am saying is that the underlying strategic architecture that allowed America to dominate the Middle East for 50 years is eroding. The costs are rising, the benefits are declining, the credibility is weakening, and the administration's oscillation between war and peace signals that American decision makers understand this, even if they cannot articulate it publicly. The real question is, what comes next? If America cannot maintain its position in the Middle East through military superiority alone, what will it do? Will it negotiate a genuine settlement with Iran that acknowledges Iranian regional influence? Will it attempt a strategic withdrawal? Will it double down on military spending and risk imperial overreach? Each of these paths has profound implications, not just for the Middle East, but for the global order. Because if America cannot maintain its position in the region it has dominated for decades, every other region where America relies on military power to enforce its interests becomes unstable. Okay, let me conclude with this. The U.S.-Iran confrontation is not a regional conflict. It is a case study in how American power is being reshaped in the 21st century. The United States still possesses overwhelming military capability. But military capability is no longer sufficient to determine outcomes. Iran possesses far less military power than America, and yet Iran can impose costs on American interests, can damage American allies, can force American decision makers to choose between escalation and negotiation. This is the new strategic reality, and the administration's inability to maintain a coherent policy toward Iran reflects a deeper inability to maintain a coherent strategy for managing American decline. The world is being reshaped right now, and most people are not even watching the right indicators. Stay curious, stay skeptical, and never mistake a quiet news cycle for the absence of history being made. I am Professor Jiang. Thank you for staying locked in.